There was a time when Microsoft believed it could win the smartphone war. With a fresh design, powerful partners, and billions in cash, they launched a bold challenge to Apple's iPhone and Google's Android. But today, Windows Phone is nothing more than a memory. So what happened? Why did one of the world's richest tech giants fail so hard in mobile? This is the story of the rise and fall of Windows Phone. Let's go back to the early 2000s. Long before the iPhone, Microsoft was already involved in mobile computing. Devices running Windows Mobile, the predecessor to Windows Phone, were common among enterprise users. These were phones with resistive touchscreens, styluses, physical keyboards, and interfaces designed to mimic the Windows desktop. They were clunky, but functional for the time. They dominated the market along with BlackBerry, Palm, and Symbian. But in 2007, everything changed. Steve Jobs walked on stage and introduced the iPhone. At first, even Microsoft executives laughed. Steve Ballmer, then CEO of Microsoft, famously mocked the iPhone's $500 price tag and lack of a physical keyboard. What he and many others didn't realize at the time was that Apple had just fundamentally changed what a smartphone could be. Capacitive, full-screen apps, gestures, a fully immersive experience. The iPhone wasn't just a phone, it was a computer in your pocket. Just a year later, Google launched Android, an open-source alternative that could be used by any manufacturer. Android was flexible, customizable, and fast-moving. Companies like Samsung, HTC, and LG jumped on. The modern smartphone war had begun. Meanwhile, Microsoft was in trouble. Windows Mobile was not built for a post-iPhone world. It still relied heavily on stylus input. The interface was dated. The user experience was poor compared to the sleekness of iOS and the customization of Android. Microsoft was losing ground fast. So in 2010, they decided to try again. This time, with a clean slate, they introduced Windows Phone 7, a brand new operating system built from the ground up. Gone were the styluses, the tiny menus, the imitation of desktop windows. In their place was something bold: the Metro UI. Metro was a design language focused on typography, motion, and simplicity. It used live tiles instead of static icons. These tiles updated in real time, showing you the latest news, messages, weather, and social updates right from the home screen. It was different, it was beautiful, it was functional. Critics loved it. Reviewers praised the speed, the cleanliness. For the first time, it felt like Microsoft wasn't copying, it was leading. But being different wasn't enough. The single biggest problem, the one that would haunt Windows Phone until the very end, was the app ecosystem, or rather, the lack of it. When Windows Phone 7 launched, the Apple App Store and Google Play already had hundreds of thousands of apps. Developers were fully invested in those platforms, and the momentum was undeniable. But Windows Phone, it was new, with a tiny market share. Developers didn't see the business case. Why build for a platform with barely any users? Microsoft tried to lure them in. They offered financial incentives, free tools, developer support. They even built bridges that let developers easily port Android and iOS apps to Windows Phone. But it wasn't enough. Some apps arrived late, many never came at all, and the ones that did often felt like second-class versions. This was the infamous app gap. It created a vicious cycle. Users didn't adopt Windows Phone because it didn't have the apps they needed. And developers didn't build apps because no one was using the platform. Microsoft needed a way to break the cycle, so they turned to hardware. In 2011, they announced a strategic partnership with Nokia, the once dominant mobile phone company from Finland. Their own platform, Symbian, was rapidly aging. Android was surging ahead, and iOS had cornered the premium market. Under the leadership of Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive who had become Nokia's CEO, the company made a bold bet: abandon Symbian, skip Android, and go all in on Windows Phone. The first result of that partnership was the Nokia Lumia line. These phones were beautiful, colorful polycarbonate shells, high-quality cameras, solid build quality. The Lumia 800 and Lumia 900 made a strong impression. They stood out from the sea of black and silver Android phones, and yet they didn't sell. Despite solid reviews and unique design, Windows Phone still couldn't gain meaningful market share. The app gap remained. Consumers were already locked into iOS or Android ecosystems. Still, Microsoft believed in the vision. In 2013, they went all in. Microsoft bought Nokia's entire phone division for $7.2 billion. It was a massive gamble. Steve Ballmer, still CEO at the time, wanted to make Microsoft a devices and services company. He saw Apple's success in controlling both hardware and software and believed Microsoft could do the same. But the acquisition didn't fix the core problem. Microsoft was now making its own phones, but they still couldn't get developers on board. The App Store continued to lag behind. Popular apps like Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube either weren't available or barely worked, and then came internal change. In 2014, Satya Nadella replaced Steve Ballmer as CEO. Nadella had a different vision. cloud computing, services, and cross-platform tools. Mobile hardware was not part of his long-term plan. The Lumia phones kept coming, the Lumia 930, the 1520, the 950. Some had amazing cameras, others introduced bold form factors. But sales continued to drop. The market had moved on. In 2015, Microsoft launched Windows 10 Mobile, an attempt to unify all Windows devices under a single platform. The idea was ambitious. Your phone, tablet, and PC would all run the same apps and interface. Even your phone could function like a desktop PC when connected to a monitor, thanks to a feature called Continuum. But the execution was flawed. Few developers built universal Windows apps. Continuum lacked app support and performance. Consumers were confused, and Microsoft itself began shifting resources away from mobile. In 2016, Microsoft wrote off the entire Nokia acquisition, a $7.6 billion loss. Thousands of employees were laid off. The phone division was quietly dismantled. In 2017, Joe Belfiore, one of the most visible figures behind Windows Phone, publicly admitted that Microsoft was no longer developing new features or hardware for the platform. He even tweeted that he had switched to Android for his daily driver. By 2019, official support for Windows 10 Mobile ended. The platform was dead. So what went wrong? The causes are many, but it boils down to a few key failures. 1. Timing. Microsoft was late. By the time Windows Phone 7 launched, iOS and Android had already taken over the market. Catching up was incredibly difficult. 2. The app gap. Without key apps, user adoption stalled. Without users, developers didn't come. It became a feedback loop that Microsoft couldn't break. 3. Strategic confusion. Windows Phone 7 couldn't upgrade to 8. Then came Windows 10 Mobile. These shifts confused users and developers alike. 4. Internal turmoil. Leadership changes, shifting visions, and a failed acquisition of Nokia created instability and inconsistent messaging. 5. Ecosystem lock-in. By the mid-2010s, users were deeply entrenched in the Apple or Google ecosystems. iCloud, Gmail, App Store purchases, photos, music, contacts. Switching required major friction. And yet, despite all the failures, Windows Phone left behind a meaningful legacy. The Metro UI influenced modern design trends, not just in Windows, but across the tech world. The focus on flat design, bold typography, and minimalism can be seen in apps and systems to this day. Microsoft also learned from its mistakes. Instead of competing with Android, they embraced it. Today, Microsoft's most important apps, Outlook, Teams, Office, OneDrive, Edge, are available on both Android and iOS, and they're among the best in their categories. They even launched the Surface Duo, a dual-screen Android phone, signaling a new approach. Hardware and services that play nicely with existing platforms. So while Windows Phone is gone, its spirit lives on, in design, in ambition, and in the lessons it taught one of the world's most powerful tech companies. What could have been a serious competitor to iOS and Android ended up as a cautionary tale. But for those who used it, who swiped through the live tiles, took beautiful Lumia photos, or customized their start screen, Windows Phone wasn't just another product. It was a glimpse into what mobile could have been, and that's why we remember it.